AJ Stearns Financial Planning. Certified financial planner Tim Stearns holds a weekly discussion of the financial challenges to secure retirement. Listen Saturday at noon for Protect and Grow with Tim Stearns.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. President Trump had this to offer in response to the news yesterday that the Catholic Church had elevated a Chicagoan named Robert Prevost to Pope Leo XIV to the papacy.
To have the Pope from the United States of America, that's a great honor. That's a great honor.
Yes, much fanfare associated with that. And, of course, all the Chicago-related memes, since he is from Dalton and spent time at Providence Catholic High School and for jetting off to South America and so forth, and then to the Vatican. But there are some issues. There are some concerns. We voiced them earlier. Now let's get some expert commentary on all of the above. Mary FioRito is a pro-life attorney. She is also a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. She joins us now. Mary, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So your review in general terms of the selection.
Well, it was a surprise. I'm here in Rome. We had black smoke for the first night of the conclave, and then there were two votes the following morning yesterday, black smoke after both of those. And then we really weren't expecting this to happen so quickly and for it to be Cardinal Prevost at the same time. So when on the fourth ballot we saw white smoke, that indicated to most people who have been watching this that it would likely be Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State. And so people were really shocked when the name, Roberto Francesco was announced. Robert Francis, that's his baptismal name. And the crowd just went crazy, the first American Pope. So it was very exciting to be here for it. But again, at the same time, surprising because, the kind of general rule was that there would never be an American Pope because it would simply concentrate too much of the world's power, in one country. But Cardinal Prevost, really for the most of his priesthood, has been outside of the United States. He's been working as a missionary largely in Peru and then for the last 3 years in Rome. So he's called the most un-American of the Americans, which I guess made him palatable enough to the Italians and the Africans alike.
Well, I have from a pretty good source that this was a done deal a while ago. That Pope Francis wanted Prevost as his successor, and they had this thing lined up for a while, which maybe is why the conclave was as short as it was.
That could be. There were numerous news stories and features on the cardinal leading up to the conclave. So that's quite right. And I happened to be standing next to an NBC correspondent from their London office just in the square there, just quite randomly. And she turned to me and said, well, and she mentioned a name that I knew. He told me this two months ago that it was going to be Cardinal Prevost. So that could be quite, I can't, obviously verify that definitively, but it's certainly within the realm of reasonable speculation. The other thing about it, I understand the enthusiasm, and you want to, give him his honeymoon period, if you will, to put it in political terms. But by the same token, the immediate reaction, I don't know. I mean, for me, if Cardinal Cupich is enthusiastic about the selection, then I am much less so. Well, that, to be honest with you, that was a concern that was raised by a number of different people with whom I spoke in the last, 24 hours, that he seems to be very much an ally of Cardinal Cupich. And that is that's a point of concern for many people because Cardinal Cupich is considered very progressive, very much a supporter of Pope Francis. But at the same time, there were some indications even yesterday that the new Holy Father is going to be his own man. He did not come out in the simple white cassock, for example. Mm-hmm. He wore the same robes that Pope Benedict wore. and he took a very traditional name. He didn't do like Pope Francis did and pick a name kind of out of thin air that no one had ever used before. So he seems to be interested in continuity in the church, right? I mean, this is a 2,000-year-old organization, if you will, but he is hankering back to some things of the past, which I think is also a good sign.
We talked about this a bit earlier, and with the qualification that I have some issues with SNAP and the Chicago, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, that organization. I have some issues with how they have sometimes conducted their affairs, but there are no fewer than 3 instances where there are allegations that in various roles that he had, now Pope Leo XIV is alleged to have turned a blind eye to abusers and their alleged abusers within his purview, starting with McGrath at Providence. And, I don't know the veracity of the allegations, of course, but it seems to me, I think I understand the faith such that reconciliation requires contrition, or at least explanation. And I don't know that the church ever gets beyond the sex abuse scandal if there isn't, a real real contrition that begets a reconciliation. And where there are clouds, at minimum, maybe there's no culpability here with respect to Pope Leo XIV. Maybe there is. I don't know. But requires explanation so that we can have an understanding of what did or didn't happen. What do you think about that?
Yeah, obviously, these kind of situations, they're horrifying. And if the new Holy Father did indeed not handle them properly, he's not accused of doing anything himself personally. As you know, it's more of an oversight issue. And I read some of the things that the people in SNAP had to say. One of them involved, the monitored living setting of a priest of the Archdiocese. It was not even an Augustinian. But so sometimes these things, in terms of who's actually the person responsible, get a little bit muddied. All of that being said, what I've read is that those things were looked into, and that the new Holy Father was found to have handled things appropriately at the time. Now, going forward, I'm sure there's going to be additional investigation that will get a little bit more scrutiny than what SNAP provided, which I think will give us a bigger picture and clearer picture of what he may or may not have done. So I think we have to really wait now until I'm sure investigative journalists on both sides of the ideological spectrum will be looking at this and looking at it very, very carefully now that Cardinal Prevost is the new Pope.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what on that? The problem I have is, why does it require investigative journalists? Investigative journalists can do whatever they want to do, but why not have the Pope lead the charge on this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that. No, and it's interesting because sometimes you'll have the groups like SNAP saying, well, the Archdiocese or the Church in general can't police itself on this issue, right? There have to be outside forces that come in who can look at it objectively. So you have sort of that line of thought, and then you have the line of thought that no, they can't. The Church can't police itself on this, which is why you have to involve.
But it's not. I get that. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, but it's not even about policing, investigating. It's just come forward and address. Just address. Be transparent, and account for your time at various stops, and respond to allegations when they rise to the level of sobriety, and there's sort of maybe there's confusion and misunderstandings about who knew what when. So, but lay it out. It's just that
I agree with you. Yeah. No, I'm saying that they should again, as you say, be the ones to bring it forward and say we here are some circumstances, and here is the story behind them and why it was handled the way that it was handled, and so that people have confidence going forward that this is going to be handled appropriately. I can just tell you, as a parent of a Catholic school child, and as someone who has gone through the training that if you are going to be a parent on a field trip or you work in one of our schools, that you have to undergo, plus the background checks. I mean,
right, right.
I was not allowed to supervise one of my daughter's field trips because my Virtus training that I've done probably 30 or 40 times now wasn't up to date. So they would, and even though I'm a known entity, they would not let me on that field trip with those kids. So if everybody was held to the same standard that school parents are, we'd be a much safer church.
No, 100%. But 100%. But that's the problem. The problem is not what's happening now because of the reforms that have been enacted. But we can't put the past behind us because it hasn't been properly dealt with.
Right. Well, and then that is something I hope the new Holy Father, he knows what a concern it is. He was prior to being elected Pope yesterday, he headed up the Congregation for Bishops, so he knows that this is a worldwide concern, and he knows that it is really something that's top of mind for most lay Catholics.
Yeah.
So he'd be very wise to address it and to address it, thoroughly and early.
Now, Mary, do you think it's humorous or sad that the mainstream media is letting us know that he's a pro-life Catholic?
Yeah, it's so silly. I did an interview with NPR yesterday. It was just, oh my goodness. It seemed to surprise them at the same time. They were hoping, I think at some point they're hoping that the Catholic Pope isn't going to be particularly Catholic, and that he'll have, these are timeless moral teachings of our church that are, as St. John Paul II said, they are unchanging and unchangeable. They can't be changed. And I have a friend who works for the Catholic News Association, and when he was Cardinal Prevost retweeted 4 of his stories, and every one of them was a pro-life story. So he seemed to have had some personal interest enough that, as a Cardinal, he was putting that on his social media. So I have no question in my mind, Amy, that he's entirely committed to the church on those issues. From what his family has said, he appears to be on moral issues entirely consistent with church teaching. Again, like unchanged and unchangeable, but perhaps a little more left-leaning in terms of social issues. But on the moral issues, and that includes gay marriage, that includes the transgender issue, and that includes abortion, he apparently is quite in line with the church.
What about his affinity for synodality and the concerns about that, if you share those concerns?
Yeah, that was the one word as I was listening in the square, Dan, where I tell you my heart sank a little bit when I heard that, because I'm not a fan of what is called the synodal process, which was something that was a great project of Pope Francis. Unfortunately, it's supposed to be a process that includes everyone, and so that people can, get together and listen to each other's perspectives. But what it's wound up becoming is a very exclusionary practice, where most Catholics that I know felt very much excluded from the entire synod process. It seems that most of the participants, it was very lopsided to a certain perspective.
Yeah.
And so, most people I know didn't feel like it was a fair listening session at all. And so if we're going to go forward with this synodal, church, as Pope Francis had put it, and it does appear that the new Holy Father is a fan of it, I hope that it will become a true synodal process that will include everyone, because right now the perception among most lay people I know is that it is exclusionary.
Well, it's exclusionary, and as you're sort of insinuating, it's an opening for social justice Catholics, which is to say leftist Catholics, which is to say leftist Catholics. We'll just leave it there. Women priests, LGBTQ. I mean, their secular political agenda.
Right, and I'm quite friendly with someone who was chosen to be a part of the process, and he expressed to me privately just tremendous frustration with it. And frankly said, it was a complete waste of time, because, he came back to his church that he pastors and said, my parishioners, they're worried about, their kids being indoctrinated with things that are in the public schools now. They're worried about making their rent every month. They're worried about their husband or wife being laid off of their work. Like they're worried about the real things that people struggle with, and not these lofty ideas. Again, largely social justice-minded people want to talk about endlessly. and navel gaze. He said that is just not where the real church is, and where people need to be accompanied. Pope Francis spoke a lot about accompaniment. Well, that means walking with people who are struggling financially or emotionally, or they have a sick child, or they have a dying parent. That's where I think most Catholics want their pastors to be, helping them through those kinds of life moments that are so defining for so many people.
She is Mary FioRito, pro-life attorney and fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Mary, coming to us from Rome. Mary, say hello to our mutual friend and newly minted ambassador to the Vatican, Brian Birch, for me, if you will.
I will.
Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Dan and Amy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Are you looking for a peaceful and enduring resting place for yourself or a loved one? Discover Fairview Memorial Park in North Lake, Illinois, a tranquil haven where your family's legacy can be honored for generations. We're excited to announce the upcoming completion of